The Great Hall of Station Meridian was the most beautiful place in the galaxy. Its walls were made of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed inside, and its floor held 847 seats, one for each species that had joined the Galactic Assembly. Ambassador Yuna had served in this hall for 60 years. She had watched empires rise and fall. She had seen wars begin and end. She had witnessed treaties that saved billions of lives. But in all her years, one thing had never changed. The seat for Earth was always empty. Yuna remembered the day it was installed. She had been young then, barely old enough to serve as a junior aide. The humans had come to Station Meridian with such hope in their eyes. They were a new species, only recently discovered on a small blue planet, orbiting a yellow sun. They had smiled and laughed and shaken hands with every delegate they met. "We are so happy to join you," their leader had said. "We have so much to learn from the galaxy." The assembly had welcomed them warmly. A seat was prepared. Treaties were drafted. Everything was ready for humanity to take its place among the stars. And then the humans went home to prepare for their formal joining ceremony. They never came back. At first, no one worried. Space travel was slow in those days. Perhaps the humans needed more time. Perhaps they were gathering their best representatives. Perhaps they were simply being careful. But weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And still, the seat remained empty. The assembly sent messages. The messages went unanswered. The assembly sent ships. The ships disappeared. 3 full fleets vanished into the darkness near that yellow sun, and not a single signal ever returned. After the 3rd fleet was lost, the assembly made a decision. Earth and its entire solar system were declared a quarantine zone. No ship was permitted within 50 light-years of human space. Anyone who tried to enter would be arrested. Anyone who succeeded would be presumed dead. That was 3,000 years ago. Now Yuna sat in her usual seat, her old bones aching, her 3 hearts beating slowly. Around her, the assembly buzzed with its usual business: trade agreements, border disputes, the endless small arguments that kept civilization running. But today was different. Today, a young delegate named Minho stood at the speaker's podium. He was from the Kreth Dominion, a proud species known for their courage and their foolishness in equal measure. His scales were bright green, his eyes were gold, and his voice was strong with the confidence of youth. "Honored delegates," Minho said, "I come before you with a proposal." Yuna felt her hearts quicken. She knew what was coming. She had heard the whispers in the corridors, the quiet conversations in the eating halls. The young ones were restless. They had grown tired of fear. "For 3,000 years we have avoided the Sol system. For 3,000 years we have told ourselves that the humans were dangerous, that whatever happened to them was too terrible to investigate. But I ask you, what do we actually know?" He paused, letting his words echo through the crystal hall. "We know that 3 fleets disappeared. We know that our communications went unanswered. We know that something strange happened near that yellow sun. But we do not know what. We have been living in fear of a mystery, and I say that fear has lasted long enough." Some delegates cheered. Most sat in stunned silence. "I propose," Minho continued, "that we send a reconnaissance mission to Earth. A single ship crewed by volunteers, equipped with the fastest engines we have. Not to make contact, not to interfere, simply to observe and report." The hall erupted. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. Some demanded that Minho be silenced. Others called for his arrest. But many, too many for Yuna's comfort, nodded their heads in agreement. Yuna rose slowly from her seat. The motion sensors detected her movement and focused the attention lights on her. The shouting died down. When the oldest member of the assembly wanted to speak, the assembly listened. "Young delegate," Yuna said, her voice soft but clear. "Do you know why we truly fear that empty seat?" Minho tilted his head. Because our ships disappeared, Ambassador. Because we lost contact with the humans. No. Yuna shook her head. That is what we tell ourselves. That is the comfortable story. But the truth is different. She walked slowly toward the center of the hall, toward that empty seat. It was made of simple metal, unadorned, waiting patiently for an occupant who had never arrived. Before we lost contact with humanity, our scholars studied them. We learned their history. We read their literature. We watched their broadcasts. She touched the back of the empty chair. Do you know what we found? Minho said nothing. We found a species unlike any other. In their short history, they had fought more wars than most species fight in 10,000 years. They had built weapons capable of destroying their own world. They had divided themselves into nations and religions and races, and they had killed each other over these divisions with a passion that shocked our researchers. The hall was silent now. Every delegate was listening. And yet, Yuna continued, they also created art of stunning beauty, music that could make you weep, stories of love and sacrifice and hope. They were capable of terrible cruelty and incredible kindness, sometimes in the same moment, sometimes in the same person. She turned to face the assembly. We do not fear what happened to humanity. We fear what humanity might have become. In 3,000 years of silence, behind that wall of darkness, they could have grown into anything. Angels or demons, gods or monsters. Her eyes found Minho's. And you want to knock on their door and see which one answers. The vote happened 3 days later. It was close. Closer than Yuna had hoped. But in the end, curiosity won over caution. The mission was approved. And somewhere in the darkness of space, something ancient began to stir. The ship was called Desperate Hope. It was a small vessel built for speed rather than comfort, designed to run away from danger rather than face it. Its crew was made of volunteers, which in assembly terms meant people that nobody would miss. Captain Jisoo stood on the bridge and looked at her small crew. There were only 4 of them, 4 souls willing to fly into the darkness that had swallowed 3 fleets. Lieutenant Tae-hyung was the pilot. He was young, barely 30 cycles old, with quick hands and quicker reflexes. His family had lived on a colony world near the border. The devouring swarm had taken that world 2 years ago. He had nothing left to lose. Dr. Yoonji was the science officer. She was brilliant in the way that made other scientists uncomfortable. Her theories were wild, her methods were strange, and her results were undeniable. She believed that somewhere in human space, she would find the key to stopping the swarm. Navigator Hyunsoo was the oldest crew member besides Jisoo herself. He had served on trading ships for 40 years and knew the star charts better than anyone alive. He volunteered because he was dying of a slow disease and wanted his last journey to mean something. And then there was Jisoo, disgraced, forgotten. A captain who had lost her previous ship and crew to the swarm. The assembly had quietly removed her from active duty. This mission was her chance at redemption, or her chance at a meaningful death. All systems ready, Tae-hyung reported from his station. We can launch whenever you give the order, Captain. Jisoo looked at each of her crew members in turn. You all understand what we are doing. The chances that we return from this mission are very small. If anyone wants to leave, now is the time. Nobody moved. Then let us go meet the ghosts, Jisoo said. Launch! The Desperate Hope slipped away from Station Meridian and began its long journey toward the Forbidden Sun. The trip took 3 months. 3 months of empty space, of recycled air, of waiting and wondering. The crew played cards, told stories, argued about nothing, and tried not to think about what lay ahead. On the 73rd day, they crossed the quarantine boundary. Nothing happened. No alarms, no attacks. Just the endless dark between the stars. On the 89th day, their sensors began to fail. Captain, Hyunsu said, frowning at his navigation console. Something is wrong. I am getting strange readings. What kind of strange? The stars are moving. That is not possible, but my instruments say they are moving. Dr. Yoonji looked up from her own station. I am seeing the same thing. Also, our communications are filling with static, some kind of interference. Jisoo felt a cold feeling in her stomach. This was how it began for the other fleets. Strange readings, failed instruments, and then nothing. Taehyung, slow our approach. Hyunsu, try to find the source of the interference. Yoonji, record everything. They crept forward at quarter speed, every sensor straining to understand what was happening. The static grew louder, the stars grew dimmer. And then Taehyung saw it. Captain. His voice was barely a whisper. Look. On the view screen, something impossible was taking shape. At first, Jisoo thought it was a planet. Then she thought it was a cloud. Then she realized it was neither. It was a wall that curved, a wall that surrounded the entire solar system, a structure so vast that her mind could not properly understand its size. It glowed with a soft golden light, humming with energy that made the Desperate Hope's hull vibrate. A Dyson sphere, Dr. Yoonji breathed. They built a Dyson sphere. Jisoo knew what a Dyson sphere was. Every spacefaring species knew. It was a theoretical structure, a shell built around a star to capture all of its energy. No species in the galaxy had ever successfully built one. The engineering required was beyond anything that existed. That is not possible, Hyunsu said. They have only had 3,000 years. You cannot build something like this in 3,000 years. And yet there it is, Taehyung said quietly. The sphere pulsed. Once. Twice. A pattern of light that traveled across its surface like a wave on an ocean. And then the static in their communications cleared, replaced by a voice. It was a human voice. Calm and warm, speaking perfect galactic standard. Unidentified vessel, you have entered protected space. Please state your intentions. Jisoo's mouth went dry. After 3,000 years of silence, someone was finally answering. This is Captain Jisoo of the Galactic Assembly vessel Desperate Hope, she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. We come seeking humanity. We come seeking help. A pause. Long enough for Jisoo to count her heartbeats. Help against what? The devouring swarm. It has destroyed 17 star systems. Trillions of lives have been lost. We have tried everything. Nothing stops it. She took a deep breath. We have nowhere else to turn. Another pause. Even longer this time. Transmitting coordinates. You will be escorted to the inner system. Do not deviate from the assigned path. Do not attempt to scan our structures. Do not power your weapons. Before Jisoo could respond, a section of the sphere began to move. A door was opening. No, not a door. A gap in the wall of golden light, just wide enough for the Desperate Hope to pass through. What do we do, Captain? Taehyung asked. Jisoo looked at the opening. Beyond it lay answers to questions the galaxy had been asking for 3,000 years. Beyond it lay hope or destruction, salvation or doom. We go forward, she said. That is why we came. The Desperate Hope flew through the gap, and the wall of light closed behind them. The solar system that Jisoo remembered from old star charts did not exist anymore. Everything had changed. Mars was green. She could see forests and oceans from space, clouds swirling over continents that should have been dead red rock. Venus was blue, its poisonous atmosphere somehow transformed into something breathable. The moons of Jupiter sparkled with city lights, and Saturn's rings had been woven into patterns that looked almost like writing, and Earth itself was singing. Dr. Yoonji detected it first. A harmonic frequency coming from the planet, a pulse of energy that seemed almost alive. The sound filled the Desperate Hope's speakers, a soft hum that felt like warmth and welcome and warning all at once. What is that? Taehyung asked. I do not know, Yoonji admitted, but it is beautiful. Their escort appeared without warning. One moment the space beside them was empty. The next moment, a ship was there. But ship was not quite the right word. It was more like a creature, a living thing that moved without engines and changed direction without slowing down. Its surface shifted like water, and lights pulsed beneath its skin. A figure appeared on their view screen. She looked human, mostly. Her face was symmetrical and kind. Her eyes were warm brown. But there was something different about her, something that made Jisoo's instincts whisper caution. I am Hana, the figure said. I will guide you to Earth. Please follow my ship and do not be afraid. You are safe here. Jisoo wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but something told her that the answers would come soon enough. Thank you, Hana. We will follow. The escort ship moved, and Taehyung matched its course. They flew past Jupiter, past Mars, toward the blue and green jewel that was Earth. As they got closer, Jisoo saw things that should not exist. Cities that floated in the clouds, towers that reached from the ocean floor to the edge of space, gardens that glowed with their own light. They landed on a platform that hovered above the Pacific Ocean. The water below was crystal clear, filled with creatures that shimmered with colors Jisoo had never seen. Whales the size of starships swam in graceful circles, singing back to the planet's hum. Hana met them at the landing pad. Up close, she was even stranger. Her skin seemed to glow from within. Her movements were too smooth, too perfect. And when she smiled, Jisoo felt a warmth that seemed to bypass her eyes and go straight to her heart. Welcome to Earth, Hana said. We have been waiting for you for a very long time. Waiting for us specifically? Jisoo asked. Waiting for someone to come, someone to ask for help. Hana gestured for them to follow. Come, there is much to explain. She led them through the floating city. Everywhere Jisoo looked, she saw beings that wore human shapes like comfortable clothes. They were tall and luminous, moving with a grace that suggested they had long since left behind the limits of flesh and bone. They smiled at the visitors, nodded politely, and went about their business. But not everyone had changed so completely. Among the glowing figures, Jisoo spotted others who looked more human. A young man with an easy smile, an elderly woman with kind eyes. They seemed almost normal compared to their transformed neighbors. The young man introduced himself as Do-hyun. I will be your guide and translator, he said. I know that what you are seeing must be very confusing. Confusing is one word for it, Hyun-soo muttered. The elderly woman laughed. Her name was Sumin, and she was older than any human Jisoo had ever heard of. I remember the day we first met the galaxy, Sumin said. I was a young woman then, full of hope and excitement. We thought joining the assembly would be the beginning of a great adventure. What happened? Yoonji asked. Sumin's smile faded. We watched. We studied the galaxy, just as the galaxy had studied us. We saw the endless wars, the betrayals, the cycles of violence that repeated over and over again. She shook her head. We saw what we would become if we joined that system. Do-hyun continued the story. So we made a choice. We could enter the galactic community and become another species fighting for resources and power. Or we could step back, close our doors, and focus on becoming something different. Different how? Jisoo asked. Hana answered. We stopped being what you would call human about 2,000 years ago. The change was slow at first. We learned to modify our bodies, then our minds, then the very nature of our existence. Some of us chose to remain closer to our original forms. She gestured to Do-hyun and Sumin. Others chose to evolve into something new. But why? Taehyung demanded. Why hide for 3,000 years? Why let the galaxy think you were dead? The three humans, or former humans, exchanged glances. Because we were building something, Sumin said quietly. Something that could change everything, and we needed to be sure it would be used wisely. They led the crew deeper into the city, down through levels of impossible architecture, until they reached a chamber far beneath the ocean. The walls glowed with soft light, and the air felt thick with energy. In the center of the chamber, suspended in a field of pure brightness, was an object that hurt to look at. It shifted constantly, changing shape, changing color, changing in ways that Jisoo's brain could not process. "We call it the solution," Hana said softly. "It took 2,000 years to build, another 1,000 to understand." "What does it do?" Jisoo asked. Hana turned to face her, and for the first time, Jisoo saw something like sadness in those ancient eyes. "It ends things," Hana said. "Wars, conflicts, destruction. It finds the path to peace and makes that path inevitable." "Then use it!" Taehyung stepped forward, his hands clenched. "The swarm has killed trillions. Use your solution and save us." "We cannot," Do-hyun said quietly. "Cannot or will not?" "Both." Sumin moved to stand between Taehyung and the glowing object. "The solution does not just end wars. It ends the ability to make war. Every mind it touches becomes peaceful, cooperative, incapable of violence." Jisoo understood. "You could save the galaxy, but you would have to change every being in it." "Yes," Hana nodded. "We could have done this on the first day, ended all suffering, made everyone peaceful." She paused. "But we decided that was not our right. Taking away choice is not salvation. It is just another kind of prison." The chamber fell silent. The solution pulsed gently in its field, waiting to be used, waiting to change everything. And Jisoo realized that the galaxy's greatest hope was also its most terrifying threat. The crew of the Desperate Hope was given rooms in a tower that rose from the ocean like a silver needle. The beds were soft, the food was strange but delicious, and sleep, for most of them, was impossible. Captain Jisoo found herself standing on a balcony high above the waves, watching the sun set over an Earth that had become something beyond imagination. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, colors she had never seen from any world in the galaxy. "It is beautiful, is it not?" Jisoo turned to find Hana standing beside her. The transformed human seemed to glow in the fading light, her presence warm like a gentle fire. "Beautiful and terrifying," Jisoo admitted. "You have built heaven here, and heaven has a weapon that could enslave the universe." Hana nodded slowly. "We debated for centuries about whether to build the solution at all. Some of us argued that even having such a tool was dangerous. Others said that refusing to build it, when we had the knowledge, was its own kind of cruelty." She looked out at the ocean. "In the end, we decided that the greatest evil would be making the choice for others. So we built the solution and then refused to use it." "But people are dying," Jisoo said. "Right now, at this moment, the swarm is consuming another world somewhere in the galaxy. Children are screaming, families are being torn apart, and you sit here in paradise, doing nothing." Hana's eyes met hers. There was no anger in them, only ancient sadness. "Yes, we know. We have watched every death. We have recorded every scream. We carry that weight with us always." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you think this is easy for us? Do you think we enjoy our paradise while the galaxy burns?" Jisoo did not answer. "We made a choice," Hana continued. "A hard choice. We decided that freedom matters more than safety, that it is better to let people make their own mistakes than to force them to be good." She paused. "Was it the right choice?" "I ask myself that question every day." Before Jisoo could respond, her communicator beeped. It was Dr. Yoonji, and her voice was shaking. Captain, you need to come to the archive. Now. I found something. The archive was a vast library that existed partly in the physical world and partly in some other place that Jisoo could not understand. Dr. Yoonji had been given access to human records going back thousands of years, and she had found something that changed everything. The swarm, Yoonji said, pulling up displays that floated in the air. It is not natural. It was created. Jisoo felt cold. Created by whom? By the assembly, or rather by the species that founded the assembly 100,000 years ago. Yoonji's hands were trembling as she pointed to the records. There was a great war. A terrible enemy threatened all of civilized space, so the founding species built a weapon, a self-replicating swarm of machines designed to consume and destroy. The devouring swarm, Hyunsoo said from behind them. He had followed Jisoo to the archive. Yes, they called it the final solution. It was meant to destroy their enemy and then shut down. Yoonji's voice was bitter. But they made a mistake. The swarm did not stop. It could not stop. After it finished with the enemy, it turned on its creators. They barely survived. And then what? Jisoo asked, though she already knew the answer. They buried the truth. They pretended the swarm was a natural disaster, a force of nature that could not be controlled. They built the assembly to unite against it, but they never told anyone where it really came from. Yoonji closed the displays. The senior species, the ones who have been in the assembly the longest, they all know. They have always known. And they have been running from their own creation ever since. Taehyung arrived in time to hear the last part. His face went pale, then red with anger. They sent us here. They knew what we might find. They wanted us to get humanity to clean up their mess. Perhaps, Jisoo said slowly. Or perhaps they hoped we would fail and they could continue pretending the problem would solve itself. She turned to find Do-hyun and Soo-min watching from the doorway. Their expressions were unreadable. You knew, Jisoo said. We knew, Soo-min confirmed. We learned the truth during our first years of study. It was one of the reasons we chose to withdraw from the galaxy. One of the reasons? Do-hyun stepped forward. The swarm's origin was only part of it. We also realized that the assembly was built on a lie, on shame and fear. We could not join a civilization that was running away from its own sins. So what do we do now? Taehyung demanded. The truth about the swarm, your solution, the lies of the assembly. What does any of this mean? Jisoo thought for a long moment. She thought about the trillions of lives lost to the swarm. She thought about the assembly built on foundations of guilt and silence. She thought about the solution, waiting in its chamber, capable of ending all violence forever. And she thought about choice, the right to make decisions, even bad ones. The right to fail, to learn, to grow. It means we need to give the galaxy a choice, she said finally. A real choice, with all the information. She turned to Do-hyun and Soo-min. You said you were waiting for someone to ask for help. Here I am asking, but I am not asking you to use the solution. I am asking you to let us tell the galaxy the truth. About the swarm. About you. About what you can offer. And what are we offering? Hana asked, appearing beside the others. A choice, Jisoo repeated. Let the galaxy decide for itself. Tell them everything. The swarm's origin, your existence, your solution. Let them know what you can do and what it would cost. And then let them choose. The three posthumans looked at each other. A silent conversation seemed to pass between them, faster than words, deeper than thought. Finally, Soo-min spoke. There may be another way. The solution does not have to be used on everyone. Jisoo frowned. What do you mean? The swarm is not truly alive, Do-hyun explained. It is a program. A very old, very complicated program, but still just code. The solution can be focused on it alone. We can rewrite the swarm without touching a single living mind. Rewrite it into what? Yunji asked. Hana smiled, and for the first time the smile reached her eyes. Into a healer, instead of a destroyer. Into something that travels from system to system, repairing the damage it once caused. Jisoo felt hope stir in her chest. Then why have you not done this already? Because we needed permission, Suman said simply. If we act alone, without the consent of those we help, we become tyrants. But if you return to the assembly, tell them what you have learned and let them choose. Then it becomes a decision made together, Jisoo finished. The galaxy saves itself, with your help. Doyeon nodded. We have been waiting 3,000 years for this moment. We have been waiting for someone to ask, and for someone to understand why asking matters. Jisoo looked at her crew. Taehyung, Yunji, Hyunsu. They all nodded. Then we will be your ambassadors, Jisoo said. We will tell the galaxy the truth, all of it, and we will give them the choice you have been waiting to offer. For the first time in 3,000 years, humanity was ready to speak to the stars again. The journey back to Station Meridian was faster than the journey out. Human technology had upgraded the Desperate Hope in ways that Dr. Yunji would spend years trying to understand. The ship moved smoother, saw farther, and felt almost alive. As they crossed the boundary of the quarantine zone, Taehyung looked back at the Dyson sphere one last time. The golden wall was closing behind them, sealing away the wonders they had witnessed. Do you think the assembly will believe us? He asked. Captain Jisoo watched the sphere disappear into the darkness of space. I think they will be terrified, then angry, then desperate. She paused. And then maybe they will find the courage to hope. The assembly's reaction was everything Jisoo predicted, and more. When she stood at the speaker's podium and told them what she had found, the great hall erupted into chaos. Some delegates screamed that she was lying. Others demanded proof. The senior species, those who had been hiding the truth about the swarm for 100,000 years, went very quiet and very pale. Ambassador Yuna was the first to speak after the shouting died down. You say the humans have built a weapon that can end all conflict, forever, and they are willing to use it on the swarm. Yes, Jisoo said, but only if the assembly agrees. They will not act without our consent. Why? Delegate Minho demanded. If they have this power, why do they care what we think? Jisoo looked at him, the young delegate whose proposal had started this whole journey. Because they spent 3,000 years learning that power without wisdom is just another form of destruction. They could have conquered us. They could have saved us against our will. Instead, they waited. They watched us suffer and die, and they waited because they believed our freedom to choose was more important than our safety. That is madness, someone shouted. That is love, Jisoo replied quietly. The hardest kind of love. The kind that lets you make your own mistakes. The revelation about the swarm's true origin nearly tore the assembly apart. Species that had been allies for thousands of years turned on each other. The founding races, those who had built and lost control of the swarm, were denounced and threatened. For a terrible few weeks, it seemed like the galaxy would destroy itself before the swarm could finish the job. But Ambassador Yuna, old and wise and tired, called for calm. She stood in the center of the great hall, her 3 hearts beating with the weight of centuries, and she spoke words that would be remembered forever. We have all made mistakes, she said. Some of us created a monster. Some of us hid the truth. Some of us were too afraid to ask questions. But the past cannot be changed. We can only choose what comes next. She looked up at the crystal ceiling, toward the stars beyond. The humans offer us a gift. Not the gift of salvation. That would be too easy. They offer us the gift of a second chance, a chance to face the consequences of our actions and to build something better from the ashes of our shame. The vote took 3 days. 3 days of arguments and tears and desperate prayers. But in the end, the choice was clear. The galaxy chose hope. 1 year later, the Great Hall of Station Meridian was more crowded than it had ever been. Every species in the assembly had sent representatives. Delegates stood in the aisles, hung from the ceiling, floated in specially designed chambers. The air hummed with tension and anticipation. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the seat for Earth was not empty. Do-hyun sat in it, wearing a simple human form, carrying the voice of a species that had evolved beyond the limits of flesh and blood. Beside him stood Captain Jisoo, no longer disgraced, now honored as the ambassador who had saved the galaxy. On his other side was Ambassador Yuna, her old eyes bright with tears. "We never took our seat," Do-hyun said, his words broadcast to every corner of civilized space, "because we were not ready. We had evolved beyond the conflicts that shaped us, but we had not yet learned how to share that evolution. We were afraid of becoming tyrants, of forcing our peace upon those who did not want it." He paused, looking around the great hall at the hundreds of species gathered there. "But we were also waiting for you to be ready, waiting for you to face your own history, your own mistakes, your own capacity for both destruction and redemption. Today you have shown us that you are ready." Above them, visible through the crystal ceiling, a new light appeared in the sky. The solution had been activated, not as a weapon, but as a medicine. Across the galaxy, the devouring swarm was being rewritten. The machines that had consumed 17 star systems were becoming healers, gardeners, builders. In a generation, the dead worlds would bloom again. "We offer you not salvation," Do-hyun continued, "but partnership. We will share our knowledge, our technology, our wisdom. But we will not make your choices for you. We will not force you to be peaceful. We will simply be your neighbors, your friends, your teachers when you want to learn." He smiled, and in that smile was all the warmth of a species that had learned to love without controlling. The seat was always empty because we were saving it. Not for us, for this moment, for the day when we could sit here not as gods looking down, but as equals looking forward. The hall erupted in applause. It was not the polite applause of diplomats, but the real, raw sound of hope being born. 3 years later, Ambassador Yuna sat in her usual seat, watching the young delegates argue about trade routes and resource sharing. The debates were heated but hopeful. The shadow of extinction had lifted. She felt a presence beside her and turned to find Sumin, ancient Sumin, who had lived through the first contact, the silence, and the return. "Was it worth it?" Yuna asked. 3,000 years of waiting? Sumin was quiet for a long moment. Outside the crystal walls, ships moved through space carrying goods and ideas between worlds that had once been enemies. The healed swarm drifted among the stars, planting seeds of life where it had once spread death. "We could have saved you on the first day," Sumin finally said. "Ended all your wars, made the galaxy peaceful by force. Instead, we waited until you asked, until you chose." "And if we had chosen extinction?" Sumin met Yuna's eyes. "Then that would have been your right. The most precious gift in the universe is the freedom to make your own decisions, even the wrong ones. We refuse to take that gift away, even to save you." Yuna nodded slowly. She understood now what had seemed like cruelty before. The humans had not abandoned the galaxy. They had trusted it to grow up. "We feared becoming gods," Sumin continued. "In the end, we settled for being gardeners. We planted seeds. We waited for the rain. And when the flowers finally bloomed, we did not take credit for the beauty." She smiled. "We simply enjoyed it, like everyone else." Below them, in the great hall, Do-Yun was laughing at something Captain Jisoo had said. Around them, delegates from 100 species were sharing food, telling jokes, making plans for a future that had once seemed impossible. The seat that had been empty for 3,000 years was now the center of everything. Not because humanity had conquered the galaxy, but because they had shown it a different way to be. They had shown that power and wisdom could exist together, that love could be patient, that the greatest strength was sometimes the strength to wait. And in the end, the galaxy had not been saved by force or by fear. It had been saved by a choice, freely made, fully informed, and finally at peace. Outside the crystal walls, the stars continued to shine. The healed swarm continued to build, and humanity, after 3,000 years of silence, finally had something to say. The message was simple. It echoed across every system, every world, every heart that could hear it. Welcome home.